All right, everybody that's out there, it is 6:30. I value your time, so we are going to get started here. I want to welcome everyone. This is our third webinar this year. The topic tonight is the IRS Compliance and Collections. So I thought to myself, instead of y'all listening to me talk, I would get an expert on the line here. And who we have with us tonight is Robert Graham. He has been with the IRS for quite some time, but he is currently the Stakeholder Liaison for the IRS in the entire state of North Carolina. I think he looks like he's worked for the IRS for over 26 years. I think he was in collections and so forth. So I think he's going to be able to shed light on what they're planning on doing with this money, what compliance and collections is going to do. He is not here to arrest anyone, so no one get scared. And Robert, we're glad you're here. And just remember, most people you're talking to are taxpayers and not tax preparers. So Robert, you take it away.
Well, thank you, Craig. First and foremost, it is an honor and a privilege to be with you folks this evening. And no, I'm not going to arrest anybody. That means I'd have to feed you, and I can't afford to feed you. As Craig mentioned, I have been with the service going on to my 28th year. I've spent 26 years in collections as a revenue officer. But as a revenue officer, I always felt like I wanted to educate, because I did not want to see that taxpayer 6 months or a year down the road with the same tax issue. So when I took over the Stakeholder Liaison, Communication Liaison, I came over to them November of 21. So it's been a nice change. It's been a learning experience, and one that I'm still learning. So I had the pleasure of actually meeting Craig a year ago through Nona Fisher and her group. And I've known Nona Fisher for quite some time. We actually went to college together. So it's been a good relationship. So when Craig asked me this past summer earlier in Charlotte if I would come and talk to his group, I was over the moon about it. And then when he mentioned, hey, come talk to us, in a nice setting like this about compliance and collections, then, I said, why not? Let's do it. So I did some research. I didn't want to do a PowerPoint, kind of feed you all information. I just wanted to have like a conversation to kind of tell you what's out there. So, compliance is huge, because, as a stakeholder liaison, that's what we preach. We want to keep you away from collections. When I think of compliance, I think of filing timely, and if I have to paying timely. And I'll kind of use myself as an example as I go on. So compliance, I'll use a phrase out of, remember Shaft back in the early 70s? He said, if you're working for the man. So a lot of us do, and if you work for the man, then you're receiving a W-2. So the things I'm going to talk about is those who work for someone else. You have an employer that you work for, receiving a W-2. Those that are self-employed. So I'll talk about the estimated tax payments. And those that run a business, such as Craig. Craig has employees, so he's well aware of the 941 taxes, where now you've got to deal with the federal tax deposits. So I'll talk about those three things. Maintain compliance on those three things, then you won't have to be on the collection end of things. So when you're working for the employer, then you're going to receive a W-2, and you can always adjust your withholdings with your paycheck. Okay. If you're self-employed, especially for those in what we call the sharing or the gig economy, those with more than one job, then you need to make your estimated tax payments. And then if you're running a business and you have bona fide employees, then you're responsible for making your federal tax deposits. Then you're dealing with the 941s and the 940 and the 1120, depending if it's a corporation. So the IRS, we encourage you, taxes are pay as you go, so you won't owe. Okay. So what that means is pay most of the tax during the year as you receive income, rather than paying at the end of the year. because you all want to set aside money. And what happens at the end of the year? Holiday season, Christmas. We set aside, I'm like you guys, we want to set aside money for gifts, family, that sort of thing. Life happens, life changes. So pay as you go so you won't owe. Having enough tax withheld from your paycheck, making quarterly estimated tax payments, and making timely federal tax deposits during the year can help you avoid that large tax bill and penalties at tax time. That's what I want to keep you away from. Okay. So there are 3 ways to pay your tax and avoid those large bills. As I mentioned, tax withholding, those that receive a W-2, estimated tax payments, and then federal tax deposits. So starting with tax withholding, right? You, from your pay, your pension, or certain government payments such as Social Security. So when you file a new Form W-4, that Form W-4 is your employee withholding allowance certificate. That's what you file with your employer. Make sure that you have the correct amount of withholding from your pay throughout the tax year. The IRS's tax withholding estimator, great tool. It helps you determine the correct number to enter on your Form W-4. That can be found on our website. Keep this stuff really simple. Get to know our website, www.irs.gov/. You can put in there tax withholding estimator. You can put in there / payments. Man, a world of information pops up. Very, very helpful. If you start a new job, you'll fill out a new W-4 with that employer. Again, the tax withholding estimator can help you determine how to have the right amount of tax withheld. You can also use the worksheet with the Form W-4. Now, the deadline for putting it into effect is the start of the first payroll period, ending 30 days or more after submitted. So again, talk to your employer. Again, easy peasy when receiving a W-4. Go online, look at our withholding estimator. Getting the right amount of tax withheld is very important. In most situations, the tax withheld will be close to the tax figure on the return if you follow 2 rules, right? Keep it simple. Just follow 2 rules. First, accurately complete the tax withholding estimator or the Form W-4 worksheet. You have a lot of tools, a lot of guidance out there. Tax preparers, individuals such as Craig and his organization. And the second rule, give the employer a new Form W-4 when changes occur. Okay, there's no set deadlines, there's no set rules. Changes occur, you can always give a new W-4 to your employer. Now, keep in mind, this is really important, right, folks? Keep in mind, the tax withholding estimator and the Form W-4 worksheet are only as accurate as the information entered. So, as you hear carpenters, measure twice, cut once. Same thing here. Make sure the information that you're entering is as correct as possible. If individual circumstances change during the year, as mentioned earlier, come back to the estimator, right, to make sure the withholding is correct. It's important to double check those figures, okay? Now, I had mentioned changes, changes that we can relate to in our everyday lives, marriage, divorce, no one wants to go through divorce, Well, I say that maybe divorce is good for some and not for others. I say that jokingly, right? Working a second job, running a side business or a side hustle that came about because of COVID. People were scrambling to make money. Receiving any other income without withholding can affect the amount of tax that you owe. So that hopefully gives you a good snapshot of receiving a W-2 and how you can be in touch with your employer. And then using our tax estimator that's online. Again, at www.irs.gov. And then I'm telling you, / put any keywords other than the tax withholding estimator. Now I'm going to jump forward to making estimated tax payments. And I use myself here as a good example. An hour and a half ago, I just got off the soccer field, came home, showered, and my wife said, "Bobby, you clean up really well." So thanks to my wife, right? So using myself as an example, I coach soccer. I've been coaching at a local high school for now starting on my 10th year, and I coach with the Fayetteville Soccer Club going on to my 23rd year. I'm self-employed with them. My self-employed income, they give me a 1099. So I've got to be very, very wary of making those estimated tax payments on a quarterly basis. So for those that are self-employed, we do offer an online publication that's extremely helpful. It helps taxpayers pay the correct amount of tax. That's publication 505. I made myself very familiar with that when I got into doing that. The publication 505 is tax withholding and estimated taxes. Now, along with me being self-employed, I also keep a lookout for keeping receipts. Now, this could be a whole nother session that I can maybe do for Craig, but it's important to keep track of your expenses when you're self-employed and obviously the income coming in. So some income is not subject to withholding. So this includes income from self-employment, some from the gig economy activity. Just be sure to make estimated tax payments on those sources of income the year. You may also have estimated payments if the withholding from your salary, pension, or other income doesn't cover the tax for the year. You may make estimated tax payments based on your income you expect to earn or any credits you expect to receive. So I remember my days in the field. I'll be in rural Robeson County. I'd come across an account that I was working a drywaller or a plumber. They'll say, well, Mr. Graham, I filed my return last year and I know how much I owed last year, but how do I know what to do this year? Well, again, you can base it on your prior year. So you can take your prior year, what you owe the prior year, divide that by 4. There's your quarterly payment. Now, well, I can't afford that amount. Well, divided by 12, now you can kind of budget what you might need to put away per month. So again, you can use your prior tax year as a guide. You can certainly use the 1040 ES, the estimated tax payment for individuals, that has a worksheet to help you figure out the estimated payments. You can also use the estimated tax payments to pay both income tax and self-employment tax, which includes Social Security and Medicare. So you also ask yourself, well, when are the estimated payments due? Okay. Well, the estimated payments are due, it's broken down per quarter. So the first quarter is January 1st through March 31st. It's due April 15th. I believe this year, if I look at the schedule, this year was due April the 18th because I think Washington, D.C. recognized the emancipation as a holiday. So it was due April the 18th. And Craig, you're shaking your head. I think you agree with me on that one?
Yes, yes, you are correct. It was April 18th.
Yep. So then the second quarter is broken down April 1st to May 31st. So then the second quarter payment is due June the 15th. And then the third quarter is June 15th through August 31st. So then the third quarter payment is due September the 15th. And then September 1st through December 31st is the fourth quarter. And then your fourth quarter payment is due January 15th of the following year. Now, if you choose, you certainly can send in the payment vouchers on the 1040 ES payments. All of us in North Carolina, we send those payments to Internal Revenue Service, PO Box 1300, and that's in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it's 28201-1300. Now, even better than that, you can make your payments online. As I mentioned earlier, you can look at all your payment options at www.irs.gov/payments. So you can make your payment online. Now, I'm old school because of my soccer income. I've tried both. I've done with the 1040 ES payments online, and I've also done the paper one. I will advise you because of snail mail. For example, for instance, if your payment is due April 15th, first quarter, I'd send your payment on April the 1st. If your second quarter payment is due June 15th, I'd send it on June the 1st. September 15th, September the 1st, just to be sure because of snail mail. Now, if you want to make it online, you certainly can. You can make it by phone or even from your mobile device using the IRS To Go app. You can also visit our website, as I mentioned, at irs.gov/payments, and then you can view all your payment options there. Now, you ask yourself, well, what if I underpay? If you underpay, you may have a penalty, most likely. Now, this applies whether you paid through withholding or paid through your estimated payments. Now, even your estimated payments, remember, you've got those dates that they're due. If you make estimated payment late, you're probably going to get hit with a payment penalty. So a penalty may also apply, as I mentioned, to late estimated payment if you a refund when you file your tax return. So now to see if you owe a penalty, you can use Form 2210. Form 2210 is an underpayment of estimated tax by individuals. Now the IRS may waive a penalty if someone underpaid because of unusual circumstances and not willful neglect. Okay, just keep that in mind. Unusual circumstances, casualty, disaster, or any other unusual circumstances. For example, say an individual retired after reaching age 62 during the tax year when estimated payments were applied. Another example could be an individual became disabled during a tax year when estimated payments were applied. So, you know, there are circumstances where those penalties could be waived. You also could be a first-time offender and have reasonable cause, okay? Now, so we've touched base on those that work for an employer, W-2s, what you need to do. We've touched base on the estimated tax payments, okay? Now, we're gonna look at running a business. Could be running a corporation. You've got bona fide employees, and now you're dealing with the 941 employer's quarterly return. Now you got the 940 FUTA, federal unemployment tax, and if it's a corporation, you've got the 1120, got the whole gamut. So in this instance, you've got to make your federal tax deposits. So I highly recommend Notice 931. Again, you can go on our website to look at this notice. This notice really dives into deposit requirements for employment taxes. It's a helpful notice to look at. Now, there are two deposit schedules that it discusses, monthly and semi-weekly for determining when you deposit Social Security, Medicaid taxes, withheld from federal taxes. These schedules tell you when a deposit is due after a tax liability arises. For example, when you have a payday. Now, I'm going to use the example when I was in the field. When I was in the field, I'm working, again, you name it, any kind of business, sole prop, mom and pop, diner, large corporation, over 500 employees. Running into tax trouble, what I would tell them in order to get caught up, make your deposits every time you do payroll. So 9 times out of 10, they're making their payroll, they're paying their employees every other week. Until they get caught up, then they can go to a monthly depositor. Okay, so I'll touch base on this a little further down. So the deposit schedule you use is based on the total tax liability you reported during the look back period. The deposit rule applies to Form 941 tax. I highly recommend publication 15, section 11. Again, publication 15 can be found on our website, www.irs.gov/publication, or you can actually put in publication 15. So federal tax deposits are made using electronically the Electronic Federal Tax Payment System, also known as EFTPS. If you don't want to use EFTPS, you can arrange for your tax professionals, financial institution, payroll service provider, or a trusted third party to make these deposits on your behalf. You may also arrange for financial institutions to initiate a same-day wire payment, again, on your behalf. Keep in mind, EFTPS is a free service provided by the Treasury Department, okay? Now, here's another caveat. Services provided by tax professionals, financial institutions, payroll service providers, and your trusted third party may charge you a fee for making your EFTPS deposits. Just keep that in mind, okay? Now, again, I highly recommend Pub 15, Section 11 for more information. You can also visit our website on how to enroll into EFTPS at EFTPS.gov. You can also call 800-555-4477. Again, that number is 888-555-4477. If there's any hearing impaired, when you dial that number, you can also dial 711 if there's any hearing impaired. Okay. Now, depositing on time. Submit, again, is recommended. I know some of you are running your business, which is fine. Depositing on time. Submit your payment by 8 p.m. Eastern time, the day before the date your deposit is due. Now, some of you are thinking out there, well, I make my deposit the following business day at 2 p.m. That's fine if you're not getting penalized, but I'm giving you the textbook answer over here, okay? As I mentioned, Form 941, the look back period. Your deposit schedule for a calendar year is determined from the total taxes reported on your Forms 941 in a 4-quarter look back period. Now, the notice 931 provides good examples on the look back period. It provides really good examples on monthly and semi-weekly depositing schedules, and also deposits due on business days. And as we know, I always use a common sense approach when I was a revenue officer dealing with businesses. If your deposit happens to fall on a weekend, if it happens to fall on a holiday, well, then just make your deposit on the next business day, and it's considered timely. You're not going to get hit with a penalty. Okay. So just to kind of wrap things up on the compliance side of things, use our website. It's free of charge. It's available 24/7. Again, irs.gov/payments. Just to highlight some of the things I mentioned, the Form W-4 employees withholding allowance certificate. You can make changes for those that have an employer. You can also use for those that are making estimated tax payments. You can also use the 1040-ES worksheet, estimated tax payment worksheet. I'd mentioned the Form 2210, which was the underpayment of estimated tax by individuals, and then Pub 505, which is the tax withholding and estimated taxes. Okay, so that kind of wraps up the compliance side of things. Just remember, that's what we want to promote: compliance, compliance, compliance. Again, we want to keep you off the collection radar. Compliance is important with filing. Now, you may have questions. Well, I owe taxes. That's why I didn't want to file my return. Folks, file your return even if you don't have the money. You don't want to get with failure to file and failure to pay. File that return when it's due. Contrary to what you hear, revenue officers and collections, they're going to work with you. Okay. Listen, they're people. They put on their pants one leg at a time, just like you do. Okay. I lived it for 26 years. We're there. We see firsthand. I'll get into the collections a little further here in the next couple of minutes, but we see living conditions. We either see assets, potential to collect, or we see hardships. And that's something I'll talk to you also as well. Craig, I mentioned I want to keep this flowing as a conversation. I don't know if you want to open up on the compliance side for any questions, or you want me to jump right in to the collection process and the 87,000 agents that were hired.
Yeah, this is a webinar, and we have great attendance right now. They can't ask questions. If they have any questions, they have to ask me. It's set up that way. So you don't get bombarded, and I keep their attention for about 35 to 45 minutes. And
awesome.
Then they start going. So, but yes, they want the biggest question that I'm asked is the media said y'all got 87,000 agents coming with guns, and my clients want to know, should they be worried? I have some clients that owe quite a bit, and they're scared. So take it away.
Well, folks, the 87,000 agents, yes, we're going to arm them, but we're going to arm them. We're going to arm them with laptops. We're going to arm them with calculators, with pencils and pens and all that stuff. And we're going to arm them. We're going to educate them. So the 87,000 was part of the Inflation Reduction Act, and it's a plan over the next 10 years. Okay. But in all seriousness, it's hiring across the board. As you may have seen, we did hire 5,000 employees that we wanted to bring on board for the filing season. But you have to understand, there's also a learning curve. When we hire new people, we have to educate them. So the first go around was to bring on people to answer the phones, because that was a main concern, especially for hiring season. So that's the first wave. But we are hiring revenue officers, revenue agents. We are hiring the ones that do the criminal investigators, the ones that do carry firearms. But it's all over this 10-year plan. So like everything else, you see it on TV, you see it on you, that's all propaganda. But to ease your tensions, and they're not coming to get you. They're not all carrying firearms. They're not all coming to knock on your door. Okay. And I'll tell you how collections is changing a bit also. So switching gears to collections. So when you file a return, whether it's a 1040 return, whether it's a 941, a 940, 1120, heavy vehicle use tax, no matter what the return is, and you owe taxes on it, you're going to, obviously, you're going to get billed. You're going to get contacted by the service center in the form of a notice. Now, I'm thinking back to my collection days, and things have changed where the service center will send out a notice, and in that notice, it's explained the tax, interest, and penalty. And they also send you, they have to protect your rights. So they're also going to send you publication 1, which is your rights, publication 594, which is a collection process, and publication 1660, which is your appeal process. I know from experience, and don't quote me on this, the service center would send 4 notices and attempt at least 2 phone calls. And if there was a lack of response, or if they couldn't work out the taxes that were owed over the phone, then the account would turn into a case, and the case would be assigned to a revenue officer in the closest field office to where you reside. Okay. So now you look at, it's called IMF case, which is individual master file, or BMF case, which is business master file. Now, also keep in mind, folks, it's not, you don't get notices because you owe taxes all the time. Sometimes, you know, you're on the radar because you've done great for X amount of years in filing returns, whether it's 1040 returns or business returns, and all of a sudden there's something that takes shape in your life that puts you in a tailspin. It could be a death in the family or a loved one. It could be a divorce. And all of a sudden, from filing, for example, filing 1040 returns, now you're off the radar and you haven't filed a return since 2018. So you may get a notice or a knock on the door that you haven't filed a 1040 return. And now they want to know why you haven't filed. Now we got to get 2019, 2020, 21, and now 2022. So it's not always you owe. It's now, why haven't you filed? So we want to get you back into compliance in filing. And they could be said for a business. There could be 941 returns that were filed up until 2021. Now we're in 2022 and we haven't received first, second, and third quarter 941 returns, and we want to know why. You know, what happened to the business? Did something happen to the owner? You know, and again, I'll use personal experience. If I'm working a mom and pop restaurant with employees, you know, the husband said, well, Bobby, my wife had cancer. How do you take care of my wife? Well, that's a legitimate reason. So it's not always taxes owed. It could be returns that need to be collected. And, you know, no money is owed on returns. We just need to get the returns filed. So please keep that in mind. So here's the big change, folks, in collections. As of July 24th, 2023, revenue officers can no longer make field visits unannounced. That's a big change. And the change came around because of safety. Safety, and there were too many impersonations. Okay? So I'll use myself as an example. So we have, you know, that's my 5-0, right? So revenue officers are doing that because for their safety and safety for the clients. Okay, so now they can only go out on limited exceptions. And those limited exceptions are if they have to serve a summons or serve a subpoena, if they have to conduct an asset seizure, or when an enforcement action requires an unannounced visit. So an example would be, say, they have a repeat business account in their inventory that they have to go make a field visit. Say, I'll use an example, a plumbing company. This plumbing company has a fleet of vehicles that's behind a chain link fence. So the revenue officer has to make a visit and has to make an eyeball. What is the eyeball test? How many vehicles? So they can't make any contact with the proprietor, but they can do a drive-by and do an eyeball check. So that would be an example of an unannounced visit, limited exceptions. Okay. Now,
Robert, real quick, I'm sorry to stop, but you've hit on a very big point that I want my clients to understand. I did have a elderly lady that was about 6 months ago, someone knocked on her door. So I want all my clients to know, if someone ever knocks on your door and they say they're the IRS, you make sure you have my business card and you hand it to them, because the IRS will not knock on your door now. And you know, it's been a humongous scam going on, and I just want to make sure my clients are aware. You're hearing it from the IRS. They are not going to knock on your door unannounced. You're going to know well in advance before they knock.
Yeah.
Sorry, Robert. I wanted to make sure that they got that.
No, you're fine. You're fine. So how they operate now is they have to send out an appointment letter. The appointment letter is the letter 725B. Okay. So this appointment letter can go out directly to the taxpayer. It can go out to the taxpayer's representative. The appointment letter could be an appointment letter for them to meet at the place of business. It can be an appointment letter for the taxpayer to come into the revenue officer's office to meet face-to-face, or it can be at the representative's place of business. So it all depends on what the appointment letter says, okay? So they work it out by sending an appointment letter first. Now, I didn't get clarification, but I don't know if this appointment letter can be sent out certified mail. And I apologize, I can get clarification, and maybe I can let Craig know later on down this appointment can be sent out certified mail. So now, say this is all worked out, revenue officer comes to your door, okay? The revenue officer must show two forms of identification. As I was getting my identification out, the two forms is, one is called the credentials or the pocket commission. So this is the pocket commission. And my pocket commission has my name and it has tax specialist. And it says, I'll read it. It says, Robert Graham, whose picture appears below, is duly commissioned as tax specialist. And I'm sure this will say revenue officer. It says, has authority to conduct official United States government business when executing duties of their appointed office during emergency operations and or cooperating with law enforcement agencies, federal, state, local, tribal, or foreign officials. Now it has my picture on it. It has my pocket commission number. It has the expiration date, and it's signed by me and also by the facilities. So the funny thing with the pocket commission, we cannot let it out of our possession. So if you ask to see it, don't be surprised to say, no, ma'am, I can't, or sir, I can't let you see it, but you can look at it, but I can't let it out of my possession. Okay. You can ask for the employee number. My number is like a 10-digit number. I don't have it memorized. Now, when I go out, I have my pocket commission, I have my smart ID, and I also have my business card. So they can give out their business card as well. And you can also ask them for their supervisor's name and number. Now, that's being overcautious because you will already have the appointment number, so you know when and where they're going to show up. So they're going to show up at your place of business, at your doorstep, or you're going to show up with your representative or in their office, okay? So just keep that in mind. Now, they're going to review the collection process with you. Okay, I'd mentioned they're going to go over the first thing, they're going to protect your rights. Publication 1. Publication 1, I have it here. You have the right to be informed. Craig, are we okay on time? Is it okay if I go over? Because it's good information, man. I'm excited.
No, go ahead.
All right.
We got
So publication 1 is your rights as a taxpayer. You have the right to be informed. You have the right to quality service. You have the right to pay no more than the correct amount of tax. You have the right to challenge the IRS position and to be heard. You have the right to appeal an IRS decision in an independent forum, okay? You have the right to finality, the right to privacy. When I was a revenue officer, I wasn't going to the neighbor. I wasn't going to the local coffee shop. It's, again, confidentiality. The right to retain representation. So if anybody has Craig representing them, Craig is the power of attorney. He has a 2844 or a Form 8821 on hand. And then the right to a fair and just tax system. So that's publication 1. Then publication 594, that explains the whole collection process. So they're going to go over that with you very thoroughly. And then publication 1660, which is your appeal rights. You know, if you disagree, and God, you know, God forbid you're not being mistreated, you know, you certainly have the right. The first line of the appeal process would be to talk to a face-to-face meeting with the manager, and then eventually the appeals process would be going to appeals. Okay, so that's all when you meet to protect your rights. They're going to educate you. They're going to then they're going to determine collectability. They have this account. They're going to conduct this interview. This interview can be face-to-face or over the phone. When COVID hit, a lot of the interviews were over the phone. So now it's face-to-face, over the phone, or with your representative, with you present. So now they're going to determine collectability. Okay, so they're going to have a couple of forms that they're going to fill out with you. One of the forms that they're going to fill out is Form 433A, which is a collection information statement for individuals. That's if you don't owe individual taxes, that refers back to 1040 returns. Basically, the Form 433A is going to have general information, your name, address, phone number, social security number, name of your employer, how often are you paid. It's going to list whether you're owning, whether you're renting, a list of your assets, you know, other than your residence. Do you own a log cabin in the mountains? Do you own a house at the ocean front of the beach? And then ultimately, the Form 433A, which is a collection information statement on individuals, is going to look at the income coming in versus your expenses going out. Okay. Now, if it's business taxes that are owed, they're going to go and secure a Form 433B, which is a collection information statement on a business. Same thing. They're going to look at now the information on the employer, employer's name, employer's address. Are we allowed to contact you at your place of business? Yes or no? Again, income coming in, income going out, business assets, you know? So these two forms will give them a good snapshot of, you know, are you in the red, or do you have assets? Do you have a way to satisfy your liability? Are you living beyond your means? Are you a country club member? Are you a Rams Club member? Do you have kids that you're paying for college education? Do you have kids that you're paying in private school? Now, yes, some of them are allowed by the IRS. So this is all everything that will be discussed with the revenue officer. Okay. But the main thing is they're going to make a determination if you're living beyond your means and assets are there. So then that's how they make a collection determination. On the flip side, if you're in the red, if you're showing a hardship, then they're going to look at, okay, if you're showing a hardship, we're not going to squeeze blood out of a turnip. But folks, the biggest thing in all of this is you've got to be in compliance. Okay, you've got to be in compliance with your filing. You've got to be in compliance on the individual side with 1040s. If you're running a business, you've got to be in compliance with your federal tax deposits and your filing there. If you're in compliance, there's a lot that they can do for you and work with you. If you're not in compliance, then they're going to give you time. Okay. Normally, when I was a revenue officer, I would set deadlines. Okay. When you set deadlines, if they said, well, Mr. Graham, can I get 45 days? I'd give them 60 days. Okay. If they asked for 30 days, I'd give them 45 days. So when you set deadlines, now it's their job to tell you, if you don't meet this deadline, now I'm going to take enforcement action. Now, this is what you guys don't like to hear, but it's their job to tell you that because they're being held accountable. What's their job, folks? As a revenue officer, they're there to collect, but they're also there to educate. So now they're not only going to tell you what you want to hear, but they're also going to tell you what you need to hear. So now their job is enforcement. So if they give you a deadline, try to meet that deadline. Look, you and I know life happens. If you can't meet that deadline, don't wait for the 11th hour. If you're 2 or 3 days out or a week out and you cannot meet that deadline, call them. They understand, they get it. Hey, Officer Jones, can I get a 2-week extension? If it's a reasonable, if there's a reasonable cause for why you need that 2-week extension, they're going to give it to you. Okay. But now if that 2-week extension comes up and you're asking for another 2 weeks, they may not. So now keep in mind some of the things that they can do for enforcement action. You've heard about liens and levies, right? So let's look at the difference. A notice of federal tax lien. So a lien is a tool that protects the government's interests, but it's recorded at the local county courthouse, which puts you on notice. Okay. Liens are usually recorded if they're assets, if there's real estate, individually. On the flip side for businesses, if there's a corporation and corporation own assets, liens are recorded with the Secretary of State. Now that puts the corporation on notice. But again, liens are filed to protect the government's interests. Okay. Again, when I worked in the field, I would use liens as a leverage tool. If you can meet this deadline, if you can come with payment, then I will hold off on filing a lien. It all depends how you work with the revenue officer, right? Mama always said you can get a little further with a spoon of honey than you can with vinegar. And when I work with the representatives, I always said, hey, man, I need your help. I need your help to help me resolve this case, because guess what? I got 55 other cases in my desk that needs to be worked. So I don't want this on my desk very long. I need the help to get this thing resolved. So the sooner that we can work together, the sooner we can get this done. I was never the revenue officer saying, you need to do this, or you need to do that. I wanted to work together to get this resolved. But they've got things that they have to tell you because it's their job. So liens and levies, right? Levies are garnishments that can garnish your paycheck and that can freeze your bank account. I always gave my clients the benefit of the doubt. If they missed a deadline, I would take an extra step by calling the employer and saying, hey, can you have so-and-so call me? Because I don't want to send a levy to you because it's going to affect their life drastically if they don't get paid this week. So again, levies can be frozen at the employer. Levies can freeze bank accounts. Now, if a levy is sent to an employer and to a bank, they can freeze it for 21 days. In those 21 days that you have that time to talk it out and work things out with the revenue officer and with the employer. Some employers don't like levies, and some employers will fire the employee on the spot because they owe taxes or because they weren't forthcoming with their employees. So just make sure you're having open conversations with your employees, with your employer, if you owe taxes with the IRS. It's not everybody's business, but you don't want that levy going to your employer and then your employer is taken off guard. Okay, so know the difference between liens and levies. Trust fund recovery penalty assertion. Trust fund recovery penalty assertion. This is another tool that the revenue officer has when dealing with corporations. Okay, we talked about federal tax deposits. When corporate officers of a corporation, those that sign checks, those that hire and fire employees, those that are main players in corporations that know what goes on and misappropriate funds and don't match the employee withholding, basically, those are held liable for trust fund recovery penalty. If employees knew that employers were not matching their 401, they'd be upset, right? If they knew that the ones that were handling the federal tax deposits, if they knew that money was going to pay the light bill for the corporation, if they knew that monies were going to pay vendors, they'd be upset. So if there's a corporate account that taxes are owed, revenue officers do what's called a trust fund recovery penalty investigation, where they interview corporate officers, those that are on bank signature cards, those that sign checks, those that hire and fire employees. They make a determination who the main players are, because corporations can rack up big bills and they can close themselves out as a defunct corporation and walk away, say with $100,000 note and say, hey, I'm free and clear. But hold on, wait a minute. They're corporate officers who can be held liable for trust fund taxes. Okay, so $100,000 note, of the $100,000, 50,000 could be asserted against those players of that corporation that are deemed responsible. Now that becomes a personal debt to those responsible officers. And that's what's called the trust fund recovery penalty assertion, because those officers are being trusted to match the employee's withholding, in essence, matching their 401k. So please keep that in mind also. And finally, revenue officers make seizures and sell assets to satisfy the taxpayer's debt. Okay. Now, in addition to that, revenue officers also make referrals to criminal investigation if they recognize any badges of fraud. And badges of fraud basically are commingling of funds. And again, folks, they find out all of this once they start gathering documents to support that Form 433A, which is that collection information statement for individuals, right? Because on that collection information statement, it asks for a bank account. So when we ask for bank account, now they're going to need documentation to support bank accounts that you may have or checking accounts. On the business side of things, same thing. So now when they start looking at bank account information, are they commingling of funds? Those are all red flags. So it's important, if you're self-employed, business account is separate from personal account. Okay. Now, I almost forgot to mention, in making a determination for collectability, there's also what we call as an offer and compromise, right? So there's payment agreements out there. There's full pay. There's writing it off as a hardship, which you have to be in compliance. And there's also offer and compromise. Now, I've been around a while. If you folks can remember, I guess in the late 90s, when one of the revenue officers, I guess down in Texas, had Willie Nelson's account. Willie Nelson was the big name that made an offer to the IRS. So there is an offer and compromise out there. Offer and compromises are worked by the IRS. So an offer and compromise basically means is, if you don't have the funds to pay, but you do have the funds, the potential to pay that may come into the future, and that you want to make maybe an offer to the IRS, and the IRS accepts it. But then again, there are stipulations where you've got to be in compliance. And I believe you got to be in compliance for the next 6 years. And if the IRS accepts your offer, then they wipe your slate clean. But in those 6 years, if you owe any taxes, that falls back into your lap. Tax, interest, and penalties hits the ground running. So the biggest takeaway I want you to take from this evening with compliance and collection is just do your best to maintain. We want you to maintain compliance, and then also safety. We want you to watch out for those impersonators. Okay. And if Craig wants me to come in and do a presentation on the tax scams, we have what we call the Dirty Dozen, and they're the most 12 egregious scams that are out there. We see them every year. So there's tons of information out there. Like I said, I'm tickled pink to present first time to you folks. I wanted to be more of a conversation instead of just feeding you information. There's good information out there on our website. Please use it, www.irs.gov. For this one, payments, you can find a world of information on payments. We talked about the tax estimator that's out there. Please make sure you're using it. And again, Craig, thank you so much for having me on board. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Good seeing you again.
Good seeing you, Robert. And
yeah, I know I'm over 15 minutes.
It's okay.
But
I mean, I'm just thankful that someone from the IRS came on and spoke. Matter of fact, before we wrap up and leave, I do want to share something with you, and you too, Robert. I have put in my workflow this new software that I am using. What this software does, Robert, is I make all my clients sign a power of attorney, 2848. I got it because I want to get, if they get a letter, I'm getting the same letter. So I know that helps me protect my clients. So If Miss Jones gets the letter, I've already got the letter too. But this new software, what it does, obviously, I know you're familiar with the transcript delivery system. Well, this is
Yep, TDS.
This is bulk TDS. This is bulk transcripts that this software downloads on a weekly basis for my clients. Not only does it download the transcripts, it analyzes the transcripts. So therefore, if there's a change in Miss Jones' account, I'm going to know within 7 days.
That's correct.
So this is tax monitoring. I know you've heard of credit monitoring, but this is tax monitoring. Really helps me because in May, when the wage and income transcripts come out, this software will actually look at the return I filed and match it up with the wage and income transcript the IRS has. I know if there's an issue before the IRS knows there's an issue, because it takes them a year to figure it out. So this software,
That's awesome.
This software is awesome. I know by the end of May, if someone has missed a W-2, I already know it. And that saves penalties and interest. Doesn't say it, there's still interest. I can't get them out of that. But if we do an amended return in June, well, the CP 2000 doesn't come out to the following year. I've already corrected the issue well before the IRS even asks about it. And what I've noticed is if we catch it and we amend it, there's no penalty. There's interest, but no penalty.
Yep.
So I've been using this software, and I want my clients to know that it's something that I have implemented. What this software does is it does detect with 95% accuracy audits within 6 months of advance. It looks for missed stimulus payments and refunds opportunities in the current and past 3 years. It does have an identity theft detection component. It finds forgotten retirement accounts. Maybe you retired somewhere in 1987, you only had $2,000 in there. We can find it. Reduces chance of refund delays. I've just been very impressed with this tool, Robert, because it doesn't just download the transcripts, it analyzes it, and it gives me a whole list of opportunities, penalty abatements. It may come up and say, Miss Jones has an opportunity of a penalty abatement. I mean, a first-time penalty abatement, and it gives me the amount.
Great.
Go ahead.
Now, listen, we always love issues and feedback, and that's great feedback. So I'm glad that you like the enhancements to the transcript delivery system. That is awesome. I do want to just mention, and I mentioned to you before, but if there are any other tax preparers on, I am also the lead for our data breach for our Area 3. So if anyone, October 15th is going to be sneaking up on us. If anyone feel like they've been experienced any type of breach, the EFIN's been breached, I'm your first stop shop. I'll gather whatever information there might be. Fingers and toes crossed that there are no breaches, but it happens that cybersecurity is out there. Please let me know, okay? And I'm your first stop shop as on the data breach team. Let me know, and I'll gather whatever information I need, and we'll get that information forwarded to where it needs to go.
Perfect. Well, Robert, I appreciate you being on.
Thank you for having me.
And we will have you again. And for everyone, I guess it's a good night. We still did it within an hour.
Love it.
Good night to everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Enjoyed it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.